The one way that you can get out of this without causing immense human pain and setting back our recovery, the one way is to get the kind of direct federal aid that we deserve. No New Yorker is responsible for this horrible crisis, but New York has borne the brunt. We have been the epicenter. When you look at the impact here, anybody with a heart would recognize that the federal government has to come to the rescue. We lead the nation's economy. We're the biggest city in the country. We constantly send resources out to the rest of the country year after year. There are so many reasons why it's clear, but just humanly, this is the reason that should matter the most, because people are suffering, because no Americans should have to go through what New York is going through, and the federal government should be there for us. I remind you, federal government was very quick to bail out the banks a decade ago. No questions asked. Federal government was very quick to bail out the auto industry. How about bailing out the nation's largest city? How about bailing out the epicenter of this crisis where people have been suffering? That is what our federal government should do for every reason, morally, practically, as any question of fairness, as any question of how we move forward. And we're still waiting. Now, what we're going through is what other cities are more and more going through, other states are going through. We're not alone. They haven't seen the help they deserve either. There's been $2.2 trillion in stimulus funding so far. $2.2 trillion, of which only $1.4 billion has been in direct aid to New York City. To give you a comparison, we got $1.4 billion and we're the epicenter of the crisis, 8.6 million people. The airline industry got $58 billion. So corporate bailouts, huge. But a bailout for the place that needs it most has been minimal. I want to be very clear. The leadership that we have seen, and I want to commend Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi. I spoke to both of them yesterday. I want to commend them for the work they are doing because they have led the way in pushing for all the elements of the stimulus that were needed, not just for cities and states, but for everyday people. Those checks are going out to help working people. So much of that came from the leadership of Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer. We know where the roadblock has been consistently. Senator McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, has stood in the way so many of the things needed. He has to hear our plea. He has to understand what it means for human beings that he's not allowing the kind of aid to flow that we need. But it's also clearly time for President Trump to speak up. I spoke to the president yesterday. I let him know what's happening in his hometown. I let him know that we're experiencing a huge budget problem, and I said it to him in the clearest terms. If we don't have any more resources, how can we provide for the safety, the protection, the health of New Yorkers? And I was clear with him and the vice president that the only way to recovery is if New York City and all our cities are able to come back strong, and if they can function. If they can't function, there is no recovery. So right now, there is an opportunity right this minute. Literally, negotiations are going on in Washington on what's being called Stimulus 3.5. There's another even bigger stimulus package up ahead, number 4, later apparently in May. But right now, there are negotiations going on Stimulus 3.5 with a focus on small business and paycheck protection. And obviously, our small businesses have gone through hell, and only the federal government can help them in the way that's needed. Working people need to know that their livelihoods will be preserved. That piece of this Stimulus 3.5 is crucial. There's a discussion right now, a proposal of $250 billion for small business and for working people through paycheck protection. There's $100 billion on the table for hospitals and healthcare workers, crucially needed here and many, many other places. And $150 billion, and I think it should be at least $150 billion. I know the governors, to their credit, the nation's governors, bipartisan consensus are calling for even more, and we need more. But right now, even to begin a discussion of $150 billion in locality aid directly to localities and states. But I got to be clear, that formula must be based on need. It must be based on what localities and states have actually experienced with COVID-19, not just some generic distribution for political purposes, but actually addressing the needs of this city, this state, what people have gone through. You know, if we were talking about a hurricane, if we were talking about a natural disaster, you wouldn't put money in for the entire nation equally if the natural disaster happened in one place. This is a different reality because this disaster of COVID has happened many places. But thank God there are some parts of our nation that have had very little impact, some parts that have had moderate impact, and then a place like New York that's borne the brunt, that's been the epicenter. This funding must reflect that reality. It's just common sense. It's about helping people and about helping us back on our feet. So I made clear to the president that his hometown needs him, and I've had this conversation with him before. All New Yorkers, 8.6 million, are watching the White House right now to see if the president will lead. Will the president speak up? If the president of the United States speaks up, let's be clear, if President Trump raises his voice, the Republican Senate will follow, period. Haven't heard his voice yet. I want to give him an opportunity to do the right thing. So President Trump, here's my appeal to you. Help us back on our feet. Tell Mitch McConnell that we need Stimulus 3.5 and we need aid directly to New York City, directly to New York State, so we can keep providing the help that people need. Keep them healthy, keep them safe. If you lead, the Senate will follow. If you are silent, they will not. It's on you, Mr. President.